At midnight on the third Friday of August, my father, who cannot tell you what month it is, stood at the door in his boots with a packed thermos and asked me for the truck keys. He has not driven in 2 years, and the road he wanted was bypassed before I was born and chained off long ago, and he knew both things the way you know rules, without remembering why. He said we were late. He said it at the door, and again at the window, and a third time very quietly into his hands, and then he let me walk him back to bed like a tired child. The notebook was in his coat, where his coat always hangs, on the second hook by the door, under the cap he wore for the Power Cooperative for 40 years. My father was a lineman, and he kept field notes the way other men keep habits, in short, flat sentences that never once explained themselves. Most of the book is work. Pole numbers, storm dates, the winter the ice pulled down 9 days of line on Brush Mountain. But beginning the summer I turned 8, 1 page in every August is something else. The first of those pages is the only long entry my father ever wrote. It says he picked me up from my grandmother's on a Friday night and took the old pass road home, because the river bridge was out and the new highway ran an hour around. It says fog sat in the switchbacks from the 3rd turn to the 7th. It says that near the top something crossed through his high beams, left to right, about 40 feet out, and that it was white and too tall, and that it did not walk. It hopped. 1 leg, thin as a fence rail, the whole length of it folding and unfolding to keep its balance, is what he wrote, like a carpenter's rule learning to stand. He wrote that its upper half turned toward the truck as it went, further around than a neck should allow, and that he did not break, and that he watched the mirror until the fog closed. The next line says, and I am keeping his punctuation, she started making the sound. In the back seat, 8 years old, seat belt still buckled, I was repeating 3 syllables over and over, in a voice he described with a single underlined word, wrong. He never wrote the syllables down. Everywhere the entry needs them, there is a short, hard blank, pressed deep enough to groove the page, as if he had started to write them twice and stopped his own hand twice. The entry says, I did not answer to my name. It says my eyes stayed open and turned all the way left, toward the mountain, for the whole drive down. He did not take me home. He drove up Sorrel Hollow instead, to a woman the whole east end of the county called Aunt Ori, though she was no aunt of ours or anybody's. She was who you went to for shingles prayers, and for talking the fire out of a burn, the way you go to the neighbor with jumper cables when your battery dies. The entry about her is 4 lines long. She met him at the steps before he could knock, looked once into the truck, and told him to keep me off the ground, so he carried me in over his shoulder like a sack of feed. Then she shut the bedroom door on him, and for 3 days my father sat in a strange kitchen and listened to 2 voices trade through the wall, and only one of them was mine. The rules from those 3 days are on the inside cover, printed, not written, the way he printed warnings on pole tags. Nobody says her name out loud until Monday. No lamp in the room where she sleeps. She does not cross running water, not even the footbridge. And below those, in different ink, in the ink of the next 26 years, 1 more. Every year that night, take her over the pass, let it look at her, and be home before day. I remember none of this. There is a fever where those 3 days should be, a story about a fever, told in the same words every time, and my mother kept that story in good repair until the year she died. What I do remember is the drive. Every August of my childhood, there was one night my father and I took the old road with the windows cracked, sat a few minutes at the overlook, and were home by 2. I grew up calling it what he called it, checking the line. He would nod at the dark the way a man nods to a foreman, and stop for root beer at the all-night gas station at the bottom of the grade, and I loved it. I looked forward to it all summer, the way you love any strange thing that is yours, and I never once asked why the line needed checking in the dark. The Augusts after I moved away for school, the entries change. Took her picture over. Parked the full hour. Home by 3. Year after year, the same 7 or 8 words, and then, 4 Augusts ago, an entry with a sentence too many. Picture is not working. It came down to the guardrail. It knows her by her hair and not by paper. Will bring the hairbrush next year. 3 Augusts ago, it says, brush went over fine, closer than I would like. 2 Augusts ago, the handwriting begins wandering off the ruled lines, the way his signature wanders now on the forms at the clinic. Last August, there is no entry at all, only the date, written 3 times, one below another, as if each time he sat down to it, he was starting fresh. Whether anything went over the pass last year, the book cannot say, and my father cannot, and I was still 2 states away then, loving him by telephone. So this August, at midnight, some part of him that has outlasted the rest kept the appointment anyway, and stood at the door with no keys, saying late. I sat at the kitchen table with his notebook until past 2, doing the arithmetic, because the 3rd Friday was that night, and it was possible nothing had crossed the mountain in 2 years. I would like to tell you I weighed all this like a sensible woman and chose to humor a sick man's calendar. But there is a version of me that has always known the exact shape of that overlook in the dark, and she was the one who took the truck keys off the nail. The old road is chained at the bottom, but the co-op keeps a key to the tower access, and a retired lineman's coat pocket is where such keys go to be forgotten. The gate swung quieter than it had any right to. The fog was where the first entry said fog would be, 3rd switchback to the 7th, and my headlights made a slow-moving room out of it. On the climb, I said his margin rules out loud, to keep my voice somewhere useful. Do not stop on the switchbacks. Windows up past the quarry cut. At the overlook, park square to the tree line, lights on, engine on. Let it look. Do not get out, and whatever starts up in your mouth, do not help it. The overlook is a widened shoulder with a guardrail and a long black drop to the river, and I parked square to the trees a few minutes before 3, with both hands on the wheel. For a while there was engine noise, and fog sliding through the beams, and the tick of the cooling fan, and nothing else in the world. Then the fog at the left edge of the light thickened in one place, upward, to the height of the young pines. It was white the way birch bark is white in headlights, and it stood the way a carpenter's rule stands when you balance it open, all joints and no weight. It came on in hops, patient ones, closing half the distance and waiting, and each time it landed the fog jumped off it the way dust jumps off a struck rug. Its upper half turned toward the windshield and kept turning, past what any spine allows, and my hands went cold on the wheel, because whatever it wanted was behind me, in the empty back seat. And lo, in my own mouth, quiet as a pilot light, 3 syllables I have never known began to warm. I did not help them. I put my teeth together and breathed slow through them, and did what the margin said, which is nothing, which is the hardest work I have ever done sitting still. It stood at the rim of the light for the length of one long breath, folded its upper half level with the glass, and looked. I do not have words for the face, because I am not sure it had one to have, and the notebook, which found words for everything else, never tried. I hid nothing and offered nothing, and let it take its count of me, one grown woman, kept and whole in her father's truck, on the right night, in the right place. The syllables cooled first. Then the white of it folded down, and down again, and went back into the fog one joint at a time, and the last hop reached me through the tires instead of the air. I made the gate by 4, and I did not check the mirror on the way down, which is not one of his rules, but will be one of mine. My father slept through breakfast, and when he woke he was easy in a way he has not been easy since spring. He called me by my mother's name, which happens now, and then he looked past me at the coat hook and asked whether the line had checked out all right. I told him the line checked out fine. He nodded at the window the way a man nods to a foreman, and he has not stood at the door at midnight since. I keep the notebook in my own coat now. On the first clean page, I wrote the date, and under it the flat kind of sentence he taught me without ever teaching me. Took myself over. It looked home before day. Aunt Ori is 40 years dead, and whatever she knew about ending this went into the ground with her, so I am not trying to end it. I am a lineman's daughter, so I walk my section, I keep the appointment, and I write it down. 27 entries now, 26 in his hand and 1 in mine. The book is not even half full.